Our County Board of Commissioners meeting to order. The purpose of tonight's reconvened session is to have some initial budget discussions. This will be this board's first discussions on this year's county manager's proposed budget. And I think we've had exactly 1 week now to digest his proposal, and this will kick off our initial discussion. So I'd like to welcome all of you in attendance and look forward to having some fruitful information tonight so that we can make a legitimate and informed decision for what we feel like is best for Macon County. So again, welcome. With that being said, is there any changes to our agenda? Any items? I see a budget amendment here. Is that something we're going to handle? Is it on here?
It's on the agenda.
Okay.
There's
Anything
three of
else?
No, sir.
All right. So, Mr. Attorney, going to be here tonight?
No, he is not.
Okay. All right, well, let's get rolling. Budget comments, Sheriff Robert Holland. Welcome, Sheriff.
I was coming to whisper something to Gary. I didn't know if he needed to add something. He had a guest here.
It's been taken care of.
It's been taken, okay. So never mind, sorry. Hopefully I'll be very short, real very short. To be honest with you, this is I think it's our 17th budget that me and Andy have put together. And unless you all have a lot of questions of me, I really don't have anything to add. We put together a budget, and probably for the first time in those 17 years, generally we have a lot of issues with our budget, and we begin that what I call a fight between now and July when the budget is approved. And this time I really don't have a lot of issues. I feel like the issues that I had that we've been able to address, and through not only this budget but through previous budgets, doesn't have everything. If I had a magic wand, it would be much different. But I'm satisfied with this budget. One of the things I'm most satisfied about is the fact that we've struggled to try to get the in-car camera systems into our vehicles, and this time it appears that as long as we continue the process that we're in now, we'll be able to keep that. I think that's a need that our county is behind on, and I'm excited at the fact that it looks like it's going to be a successful addition to our budget this year.
Good. And
so as long as you all are okay, I'm okay. Having said that, I'll open the floor to you all.
any questions, board? I've got one.
Okay.
Sure, I know there's some increased funds going to your department primarily for courthouse security, which in my opinion is basically an unfunded mandate that we've got to do. When do you expect that? Is that going into place July 1, initial budget year, or when do you think that'll be up and running, or do you not want to say?
Well, there's I would prefer not to say for
Okay.
security reasons,
Okay.
but as soon as we can get everything implemented, equipped, and employees hired, that process is already beginning. What we're doing is actually hiring people part-time. So when we do go into putting them into place, the paperwork is already done, with the exception of making them full-time, because it takes a long process to get somebody hired on. And so that process has already started, but very soon. And
also in the budget, you might see a line item that the sheriff and I and Major Shields had long discussions about this, and that's about how we do the medical in the jail. And that system has changed for a lot of reasons. Number one, for protection of those who work inside the jail, and secondly, the liability that the county faced every day. We had one incident that could have really been tragic, so
and when you say that, I'd like to reiterate that, not tragic on an inmate, tragic on an officer.
that's right. He was an officer, and so, but in this budget, and you won't see, there was no really increase in that, but it's the way we, and thanks to the sheriff and Major Shields and the county manager, we're able to, we hope that problem is alleviated and we can move on.
We hope so. Dr. Creel has been a real advocate for us in our jail and getting that program into shape, and he's agreed to take a lot more steps. So we're excited about that opportunity.
Good. All right. Well, thank you, Sheriff. No further. That was easy.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, and I hate to interrupt, I thought this was on the agenda, I just hadn't glanced at it, but Warren Cade with EMS and Todd Siegel with Emergency Management are here, and I was gonna see if they could give some comments on their budget as well.
Oh, that's a relief. I thought you were going to get me on something.
I thought I had put that on the agenda, but I seem to.
Sorry, Charlie, you're going last. No, come on.
Whatever. Good. No, I'm going to make mine very short too, because I'm going to echo sort of what Robbie said. I think this is my 21st year of doing budgets, and obviously we didn't get everything we wanted either, but we've negotiated some stuff out with the manager, and I think we're able to meet the basic needs that need to be provided to the folks out there to keep our levels of service up. There's all sorts of data and numbers and statistics that are in your budget package that I can provide with you to justify some of the things that we've asked for. But a lot of it, and I guess this goes back to what he's talking about doing these for so many years. After you've done this for so many years, you start to get the feeling of what the need is out there for the public, and you understand. It's almost like you have the feeling of where your service is and where you're at as far as the provision of that service is and where you're about to have lapses. And I feel like what we've got proposed and what Derek has agreed to keep in the package here is enough to meet those needs for us. And we appreciate the acceptance of you all to hear us out and to try and meet those needs of public safety in Macon County. It's important for a lot of folks. It gets more and more important every day when you look at the volume of stuff that we deal with, the time frames we deal with it, and the fact that it just doesn't seem to ever stop anymore. So with that being said, we're okay with the proposal, and I'm open to questions that any of you may have of me.
Any questions?
Just a comment, Mr. Chairman, if you really study the budget, if you go back and look over a 5-year period at the EMS budget, you will see, and just a word of caution to this board, that, and Warren can speak to it if he wishes, but I think this board is going to have to continue to look at EMS, and I'm not saying you didn't get enough increase for it, but I'm saying looking in the future, your budget's going to be escalating. It's going to have to. The number of calls, but you look over a 5-year span, especially over the past 2 years, of what's going on at EMS, and so just a word of caution to this board that next year's budget could certainly reflect more. If I'm wrong, you tell me that. But
No, you're absolutely correct. No, and I usually bring up the examples. Usually when I come to work, I have a routine every morning, and I go back and I look at everything that was handled overnight from the time I left until I came back in the next morning. And typically that used to be 100 calls a day, somewhere in that neighborhood. And now it's not uncommon for us to see well over 100 pages of things, particularly when you have a 2-day weekend. Last night, I think we were up to 126 pages of incidents, of about 2 incidents per page of stuff that happened from the time I left until the time I got back. And that reflects not just on us as a 911 center, but EMS, fire, law enforcement, and even your other agencies, your social service agencies. We do the stuff for DSS on call, we do hospice, we do all of those things. So there's a lot of things that go through there. I will say that we have made really good progress, and I think Lori will agree. Our goal 10, 15 years ago was to fund particularly EMS on a 50-50 basis. You wanted 50% funded by the taxpayer to have the availability, and 50% funded by the fees that we bring in from our medical billing. And we got off track on that. For the last 2014, 15, we were about 62% taxpayer funded and down in the 40s for what we were bringing in, and we've kept that back up. We've crept up to about fairly close to the 50-50 mark. We're not 100% there, but we've tried to be very diligent in adjusting our rates to match what's Medicare allowable, to get that best percentage back and to stay on top of our record keeping. more diligence on our staff to make sure that the medical records are accurate. We've coordinated with Mission Hospital, which is now HCA, to access their database to make sure we get the right patient information on billing information. So a little bit of coordination on our part seems to have helped us financially, so we'll stay diligent on that to try and hopefully not have to deal with any of the financial issues that might come about in the future. And we've also grant funding. We've been pretty diligent about trying to go after grant funding. We got the $20,000 opioid response team grant last year. There's some other opportunities through the new healthcare coalitions, the Nantahala Highlands Trust, the Highlands Foundation, used to be the Highlands Hospital Foundation up in Highlands, and the Dogwood Trust. There's some other opportunities that might help us in the future, so we're going to keep those options open as well.
Anyone else?
You want to speak while Mr. Ziegler's here about dispatchers and how we're doing and?
Well, that's some of the data that I was going to bring up. One of the things in your packet is you'll notice there's some data in there that looks very, very technical, and it talks about answer times and hold times. And Todd, you're welcome to step in or correct me on anything, but one of the things that we start noticing, we like to answer everything within 10 seconds because you don't want somebody ringing 911 and wait. 10 seconds doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're on the phone waiting for somebody to answer, 10 seconds is a long time. And what we noticed was about 7 o'clock in the morning, we were starting to see a significant increase in call volume up around the 2,000 calls per year in that time frame, which bumped us over, matter of fact, well over. We had 121 calls that were between 11 and 15 seconds, and they went all the way up to about 40 seconds on answer time. And we even had a couple that were over a minute. And that trend seems to be consistent all the way through, realistically, to about midnight. So what we do, a lot of centers will just blank staff their center. They'll do 2 or 3 people on a shift. Jackson County runs 3 people on a shift, 24 hours a day. What we tend to do is we try and target the time frames. Right now, we've got 2 people 24 hours a day. We have a swing shift person that comes in at 10 in the morning, works 10 in the morning and 10 at night to try and catch those volumes. But even with the third person, we've noticed that those time periods are getting out of what we would consider a normal status, which is why any new staffing we put on, it won't be just a blanket add 3 on a shift and just run with it and hope for the best. We'll probably overstaff with 4 folks during those time periods when we're not meeting our goals, and then keep our staffing back down to 2 at night, which keeps us down on our staffing, but it also tries to meet the need, and then we'll reevaluate that every 6 months or so to make sure we're hitting those numbers. So we're fortunate to have a lot of data. I tend to be a data person, so we have a lot of data to back up what we ask for. So if anybody wants any information on those, I'll be glad to provide those any other time or offline or somewhere.
So I take more by that, Mr. Chairman, I think if we'd ask Mr. Cave to come back in 6 months and just see how, if it's going to continue, if his data's holding up, and if we need to make adjustments at that time.
I'll be glad to do a report anytime you want.
I'm sold. I took my son in for a tour about a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, and we were there probably about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was floored at what 2 dispatchers were handling.
Well, and one
We
of
were
the
there 30 minutes, and neither one of them got to talk to us at
One-
all.
one of
Not even
the-
a hello.
I spoke to.
Well, yeah,
But one of the things that a lot of people forget is your 911 system in general. When I say that, I mean the people that answer the call, the EMS folks, the fire folks, the law enforcement folks, what people consider 911. We tend to be the catch-all for a lot of things. We're the people that you call that doesn't have a waiting list. We come when you call. Whatever the problem is, we have to be the one to address it. We do a lot of things that some 911 centers may not do. We do after-hours dispatching for electrical service in Highlands, water service in Highlands, utility services for the town of Franklin. We do hospice, DSS, animal control, North Carolina Wildlife. We send the messages to Highway Patrol. So I just want to make sure that you understand that any benefit that you get out of this is not just shared with us, but it actually goes to these other agencies, because, well, obviously when the sheriff comes and adds staff, then that reflects back on the people that answer the calls. We sent our folks through some additional training about a month ago, I guess, for the protection orders, domestic violence orders, because what we found out was that we had orders that were coming in to the judge or to the magistrate over the weekend, and they weren't getting entered into the system until Monday morning or overnight, which, it's still a valid order. However, if it's not in the system and you have a problem with an individual somewhere, you don't have the backing to have that recorded in an appropriate system. So we actually sent our folks to training to be able to do those after hours. So we've put a lot of that on them, but we put a lot of that on them because that was a service that was required of us. So we're pretty proud of what we do. But I will, any other questions you have about that, obviously I'll be glad to come. You can come look, I'll show you, or we'll
Just go watch.
give you any data that you'd like to have.
It's a busy place.
It's wild.
Warren, you opened this up, so by one of your comments earlier, so I'm going to ask the question as it crossed my mind. You said it, you mentioned that you're basically running on about 50% revenue, which you're charging your users, 50% from the county. Every year since I've been a commissioner, we have fire departments that come up. Tax increases, I think we got 2 this year asking for a tax increase. One of them we're going to discuss tonight. I know in Macon County, you have somebody passing through here from Atlanta going to Cherokee. They're in a car wreck. We go out, we service it. We use our volunteer time, our staff time, our fire trucks, our oil dry. We take care of it, but we do not bill those people. Is that common to, like, if you go through Atlanta in a wreck, are those fire departments going to bill you? Is there any chance of getting?
My understanding, it's fairly common that that's the way it works in most places. I'm not familiar with any place that does. I did have a conversation with Haywood County yesterday. They are contemplating billing for medical services for searches. We had a search, actually a carry out, probably 2 weeks ago now, that took basically most of a day. And they were contemplating billing for the service of the medical people just because they had to go in and come out even though they weren't transported. I don't know that we're there yet. I think that gets a little complicated. We did start billing for, we have a couple of different billing options we put in there. We do bill for certain treatment, no transports now. Those are only if we administer some particularly expensive medication. If you have an anaphylactic reaction, you're diabetic, the D50 solution we use is very expensive. We actually have a reduced charge for that to try and recoup the cost of the medical supplies that we use. But still, for your basic check of blood pressure, make sure you're okay, we don't charge for those. And again, we don't charge for community medic visits either. And out of our 8,000 and some patient exposures last year, about 2,500 of those were community medic visits. The hard part for me to stand up here and tell you, though, is had we not done that, how many of those folks would have been in the back of an ambulance somewhere, either necessarily or unnecessarily, and what would that have done to our availability to be able to come to your house or your house? Because our goal is to meet at what we call 90% fractile time with EMS. 90% of the time when you pick up the phone and dial 911, I should have one ready to come out the door to you. Occasionally we fall in that 10% mark. But we've learned over the years how many resources it takes and how to rotate that through to keep those numbers down. But the thing I can't tell you is out of those 2,000 and some patient exposures we had on the community medic visits this year, would 100 of them tied up an ambulance? I don't know. 500? I don't know. Would they have generated revenue off those? Maybe. But a lot of times if you have particularly a high utilizer, you may have a lot of bills that go out, but you may not collect a lot coming back in. So your expenses outweigh the revenue you have coming in. So right now, the intangible part of that's hard to measure, but for the time being, we're pretty comfortable with the revenue model we have, and particularly since we adjust the revenue streams every year at budget time to meet what's allowable.
One last bit on the fire task force, now that we've had a little time to and you've had time to see how it's doing. We had a lot of discussion about this board did. So how effective, or tell us a little bit about how it's going.
I'm extremely happy. They have become a catch-all of a lot of different things. The carry-out, they left the office the other day at about 6:30, and they got back about 4 o'clock that afternoon, and they went in with the fire department to do a carry-out. I think we had 4 volunteers with them, and then the paid staff and EMS staff. So what they did was they allowed some of the volunteer folks to not have to leave their jobs to come in and do that. We have varying relationships with different fire departments. Some of them, depending on where it's at, they may come in and they may wash the hose or help them put their stuff back together. Some of the other ones, Town of Highlands being one of them, they went through driver's training with them, and they say, if you cover for us when we go to Cashers, and if you need to go somewhere, you take our truck and take care of our business for us. They've done things such as showing up at fundraisers to help them clean up the buildings. And he and I just had the discussion coming in. We have a little bit of a telecommunicator shortage Friday night or Friday day. We've cross-trained them so that they can sit in if we get in a really bad bind, and one of them's probably going to sit in the 911 chair over the weekend. So honestly, I've been fairly pleased. Been really pleased.
Good deal.
Thank you, Warren.
Thank you, Warren.
Thank you, Will.
All right. Budget comments, Macon County School Superintendent, Dr. Chris Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr.
Dr.
Chairman.
Baldwin, welcome. I'd like to, before we start, Dr. Baldwin, I'd like to say every year since I've been a commissioner, I probably get more contact from people that are wanting more funds for the schools, increase every year since I've been a commissioner. And so I went back and did a little research. And since I've been a commissioner, this board has provided more funds to education than any other department, even more so than the 2 public safety departments that we just heard. So I feel like it's important to recognize that this board, even though we get beat up a lot over it, has put a greater and higher priority on education than any other department in this county. With that,
Well-
take it off.
Well, and I just want to say that we appreciate the support of this board. And before I go into our budget message, I'd just like to say that working with the Macon County, whether it's the Sheriff's Department or Public Health or the Emergency Services or the Fire Departments, as a member of this school system, I'm extremely grateful for the level of support that we have in this county for our school system from from the Macon County system itself, Sheriff's Department, Health Department, our SROs, our school nurses, emergency services, the way that they work with us in terms of emergency planning and other services for our schools. We couldn't ask for a better partnership.
I agree.
From the other services.
I agree.
With that said, I do have some concerns with the recommended budget, and wanted to take a few minutes just to discuss school funding in the state of North Carolina, and I promise I'll be as brief as I possibly can. I shared this last night with the school board, and I think it took about 20 minutes. Tim was able to pull this up on the computer. I don't know if y'all can see the one in front of you, or if you'd like to just follow along with the packet, however you'd like to proceed. What I'd like to do first is call your attention to this spreadsheet.
I did too. Can you see it on your screen?
I can see it on my screen, yes.
I can't see it on my screen. I don't know what.
Well, it's in your packet.
Okay.
Um,
Can we get that up, perhaps, so that the public can see it?
Okay.
Just give us just a second.
It's on.
County manager did that part of it.
It's like it's not talking to these monitors. Is everything connected? I wonder.
See if you can get the ball game.
There we go.
You can get the ball game to come on in?
This information is from North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, and it is school systems in our region and how they fund education within their system, particularly at the per pupil level. You can see I've highlighted the per pupil local expenditures for salaries, the total per pupil expenditures local, as well as the total per pupil expenditures from state, federal, and local sources. And when it references local sources, that would reference any grant funding, any fund balance that we expend, any donations that are given to the school system and we expend during that fiscal year. All right, I would like to just point out the difference in local salary funding for Haywood County and Macon County. Notice that they're roughly $1,000 per pupil for salaries. And then ask you to look then at Clay County and Graham County, local salaries. You'll notice that their local salary funding is much less than Haywood and Macon. And there's some fluctuation as you look at the other school systems in our region. But that trend seems to hold up. Also, if I could call your attention to the total per pupil funding for Graham County at $12,318 per pupil, and then the total per pupil funding for Haywood County and Macon County. Then compare that to their local funding. There's a pretty significant difference. Now, keep in mind that reference that I made about the local salaries as we move forward for these other discussions. Now, if you'll look at the Word document, this document, it ranks those local per pupil expenditures as well as the total per pupil expenditures. Now, notice Graham County spends a total of $12,000 per pupil. Included in that $12,000, though, is a $1.8 million fund that they receive from the state because they're a small school system. School systems that are under 3,300 students, I believe, receive an amount that's based on a formula from the state. And that funding is, my understanding, is because of the small school system has a smaller tax base from which to draw support for their schools. They also receive $67,000 in low wealth funding. Swain County receives $1.6 million from the state because they're a small school system. They receive $162,000 from the state because they're low wealth. And then they receive another $577 from the federal government in the form of impact aid funding. Impact aid funding is provided for a number of reasons. The amount of national forest around the county or within the county prevents the county from being able to draw on that for property value, property taxes. And in the case of Swain and Graham, and I didn't include Graham County's impact aid money, but it comes from the number of Native American students that they serve. Clay County receives $1.58 million for small schools. Cherokee County receives $1.5 million from small schools and another $528,000 from low wealth. And we're fortunate here in Macon County that we receive some additional state funding for our geographically isolated schools. But you can see where we fall in terms of total per pupil funding as well as local per pupil funding in our region. Now, going back to what I pointed out about salaries and local salaries, because Graham County, Swain County, Clay County, Cherokee County receive that additional state and federal money, they can use that money to pay for teachers. Haywood County, Macon County don't receive those dollar allotments, and more of our teachers have to come out of local funds in order for us to be competitive with those counties in terms of what we provide our students. Now, when the state superintendent put together his information regarding teacher pay across the state, he did not include locally funded teachers. So school systems who had locally funded teachers, who are traditionally the lowest paid teachers in the system, those teachers were not included in the state superintendent's calculations. That caused our salaries to appear to be inflated compared to others across North Carolina in our region. Now, the state provides the salaries for teachers. They set the salaries for teachers. So across the state, they're virtually the same. The only difference would be the local supplements. And I've included these in your packet. These are the local supplements across the state. There's 115 school systems in North Carolina, and 101 of them provide a larger local supplement than Macon County does. Within our region, Transylvania County provides a local supplement of average of about $4,160. Haywood County provides a local supplement of $26.24. Jackson County provides a local supplement of $975, and Macon County, we're grateful to have a local supplement of an average of $961, because the way that's been funded in the past is a 2% supplement based on that teacher's salary. So in other words, a teacher that's been in the school system for 25 years, their supplement's going to be a little bit larger than a teacher that's just started in Macon County, because it's 2% of their salary. But that's the breakdown. And I just wanted to point out that when the state superintendent compared those salaries, they weren't exactly accurate. Another thing I think is important to point out is that we border Rabun County, Georgia. And right now, in Rabun County, Georgia, the average teacher down there earns about $4,783 more than the average teacher in Macon County. In other words, if a teacher left Macon County and went to Rabun County, Georgia, they would earn about $4,700 more just based on their credentials and their experience. Now, currently, the Georgia governor is proposing a $3,000 salary increase in 1920 and another $2,000 salary increase in 2021. So that's something that we have to have in the back of our minds as a school system when we're trying to hold on to our teachers and to recruit new teachers. So I hope I didn't bore you too much with explanation of how schools are funded here in West North Carolina, the differences in how they're funded, and how that impacts what we try to do to keep our students competitive. Now, our concerns with the budget, the recommended budget, is that with the new class size legislation, we anticipate needing to add 4 K-3 classrooms next year, 4 K-3 teachers.
How many more students you going to have overall, countywide?
Well, it's hard to project. Now, in kindergarten last year, we did pick up 50 students.
Total across the county?
We added 50 students in Macon County in kindergarten, which is a huge number for that particular grade level. We added 50 students across all grade levels, so all the increase was in kindergarten. We anticipate adding a first grade or a kindergarten classroom at Cartuca J, a second grade classroom, a first grade classroom at South Macon, a first grade classroom at East Franklin, and a kindergarten classroom at Highlands. The issue for us at Highlands You know, as you know, the geographically isolated schools bill provided one teacher per grade level for Nantahala and Highlands. Well, with the K-3 class size legislation, the maximum class size next year for any classroom kindergarten through third grade is 22 students. If we exceed 22 students, we have to provide some sort of resolution so that classroom is reduced in size. Now at Highlands, they're projecting 25 students in first grade and 24 students in kindergarten. That means we're going to have 2 first grades and 2 kindergartens up there. Now normally we provide a teacher assistant, and what we've done is take the funds that the state provides for teacher assistants, and they provide a formula. It's a number of teacher assistants per classroom in kindergarten, a number of teacher assistants per classroom in first grade, second and third grade, so on. We have focused on K1. We've tried to provide a teacher assistant at those grade levels. Now, the state, for us, because of the number of schools we have in Macon County, and the fact that our kindergarten and first grade, second grade, third grade students don't come in perfect blocks of 18, 16, 17, and 17, we have faced some challenges like we're looking at with Highlands right now. Last year, we had to fund teacher assistants out of our local appropriation in the amount of about $150,000. So we're looking at needing to pick up additional teacher assistants this year from some funding source other than state. We were $150,000 short last year out of that state money. We're looking at needing additional teacher assistants this year. I have a teacher here from Cartooga that has taught with teacher assistants, and she's also taught with part-time teacher assistants and full-time teacher assistants. And if you wouldn't mind giving her just a minute to give you an idea of what that's like.
Sure. How many students, how many kindergartners? You said 25 in Highlands?
25, I believe they're projecting 25 in first grade and 24 in kindergarten.
What are you projecting in Nantahala this year?
Less than 10.
In each class? Or
Yes.
10 total?
Yes.
So 10,
So
roughly 10.
it would be one, at Nantahala we'll provide one kindergarten teacher, one teacher for kindergarten and first grade.
Okay.
One teacher assistant for both grade levels as well.
Okay.
And they'll also provide one teacher for second and third grade and one teacher assistant for both grade levels.
Okay.
So there'll only be 2 teachers for grades kindergarten through third grade.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, welcome.
Hi, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Angela Phillips. I teach second grade at Cartooga J, and I've been there for 27 years. And when I began my career, typically had 17 or 18 students in the class and a full-time teacher assistant, and we could really meet the needs of those children. And by the way, it was a different type of child 27 years ago. Now I have an assistant for about an hour and a half a day. I've had as many as 25 children by myself. This year I have 20, thank goodness. And you have to imagine when they come to me, they're first graders. You know, they're pretty helpless. So there's a lot aside from education. There's bloody noses, there's tears. I'm just really unable to meet their needs. And we are provided with this 29.5-hour person. I get her an hour and a half a day. Invariably, she's not there when I need her. That's not her fault. She's spread way too thin. The challenges that we're facing right now, I know you read the Franklin Press, you know about the drugs, you know, but unless you're in the trenches every day and see a 7-year-old with their head down on their desk crying their eyes out while you're trying to teach math and pat them on the back and say, honey, what's wrong? Well, my daddy got arrested last night. Or children that are asleep because the house was so noisy. The mental health issues and the lack of proper parenting is making our job virtually impossible. And I will say this, and this is a pretty bold statement, and it may be wrong for me to say, but if I had a child or grandchild entering Macon County schools right now, I'd be very hesitant. I would be very concerned seeing what I see. I see your little cute grandbabies running around down there below the house.
On the Macon County.
Okay, now, how does that make you feel? You know, it is sad, but it's true. We have children that are not getting the proper love, the proper instruction that they need from birth to school age. I've been teaching second grade a long time, and only in the past 5 to 7 years has it happened that they can't tie their shoes anymore. So a job that a parent should have taught them to tie their shoes when they were 4, they can't tie their shoes, many of them. So I'm dealing with Band-Aids and shoestrings and crying. And as a matter of fact, I had a mother of a child in my class a couple of years ago get a DUI in the car rider line. So, you know, that's a pretty big obstacle for a child to overcome. When they come to school and they are sad or worried or scared, education is not happening. They have to feel loved and safe before they can learn. And what we need now more than ever are people. These kids don't need another computer game to look at. They need a human being who is willing to listen and give them love and encouragement and instruction. And I just feel like a full-time assistant, and especially K through 2, is just, we desperately need it. We desperately need it. It is interfering with the education of the children. The children that have the ability to learn and are from a home that is stable don't get the instruction that they deserve because my time is so taken up with just problems, just really true. You can't think of a second grader having a mental health problem. They do. They're from very unstable homes, and you know, Robbie Holland talked about the drugs. That's what's going on. The kids are not getting what they need, and they're bringing the problems in, and it's just, I would implore you to think about more people. We're spread too thin.
Have you implored Senator Davis and Representative Coleman who cut the teachers?
Yes, I certainly have.
And they said what?
I can't discuss that without crying. I was not pleased.
You can't make it up? And
Well,
now you got the
everything's
charter
changed.
school situation.
Everything's changed in your 27 years, and I appreciate you being there for these kids. And there are those people talking about Macon County schools out there. And yes, my grandchild is going to go to Raven Gap instead of Macon County. I'm not happy with that, but it's not my child. We want a good education for them. But the things with the drugs, you know, we've got school health nurses now that we've never had. You know, we didn't used to have those. We got SROs in every school. You know, we're putting more people into the education system, but still the product's not. It's not working.
Well, and I'll tell you, the 29.5-hour people, they work and they try, but they're looking for a 40-hour job. So they're floating through, basically.
Yeah.
They want a job.
Yeah.
And because these children are so needy and need that love that they oftentimes aren't getting at home, the 29-hour people don't have that bond with the kids, and they don't know their whole backstory like the teacher does. And so it's difficult for them to, like I said, they're invariably, my helper is not there when I need her. You can't predict when somebody's going to get a nosebleed or somebody's going to fall on the floor and cry because they just happen to think about the fact that their mama's in jail.
You mentioned the drug issues and all that. What is the ESLs? Has that had an impact on your ability to teach the English second language?
Not
Children.
at all like the drugs and the sadness. I mean, yes, it is a problem, but it's not the main problem.
But that's one of, I mean, there's more than one problem,
Oh, yes.
and
Being born and raised in Macon County, I'm very saddened with what I see happening. And if I would not believe what is happening in my own hometown unless I was in that schoolroom every day. It's a crisis.
Of the 20 kids that you have, Ms. Phillips, do you think that, are there a certain number of those kids that you spend a lot more time with than the others? You got some advanced kids. And you
Most
have-
definitely.
So out of those 20, would you say that half or 15 of them have to do a lot of stuff on their own, and you've got 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 you have to really concentrate on every day?
To be quite honest, and of course, this wouldn't be every school year, this is just an estimate. If I had 20 kids in the past 5 years, I would have 5 that were huge problems. I would have 5 that were from very stable, good homes, and I would have 10 that were borderline and have problems here and there.
So the majority of your time is spent with this other group of 4.
It has flip-flopped, and when I began teaching, I would say 1/4 of the class had a little problem. Now I would say 3/4 of the class has a big or little problem.
75-25.
Yes, yes,
societal issues, it's amazing.
yes. The home, the stability, the love.
Yeah.
If you don't have that love and safety, you can't. If you don't have that good feeling, then education is not your priority, you know. And these kids who have these problems are, and no fault of their own, but they're interfering with the children that can learn and be successful and maybe stay in Macon County and make this a good place to live.
And it's all counties. It's just, you know, we're sort of prejudiced to where we're from. But it's everywhere. It's just, I was in Sampson County, and it's just, but here in Macon County, when you can't afford a teacher, I've always been a proponent of teacher assistants. Because that, and of course, I'd love to see teacher assistants take mental health training. Just, 40 hours of mental health training, because now it's more important than ever. To get, if you don't start with this younger generation, you're going to pay for it dearly.
I'm seeing things in 7-year-olds now that I could have never imagined. Language that is unbelievable, horrific. Their parents let them watch horror movies. It's truly unbelievable. Makes me sad.
And you talk to other second grade teachers across the county, I'm sure.
Oh, yes.
And they see them the same thing.
We all feel the same way. We need another person in there to simply listen to problems, give love, pat on the back, Band-Aid, whatever's needed at that moment. Because I'm being just very honest with you. I try as hard as I can, and the superintendent's standing beside me, and academics is my #1 job, should be. It's taking a back seat. Academics is taking a back seat to the mental health issues, the problems. I said it once, I'll say it again, to crisis. We need people.
And that's shared throughout the county. I mean, you're not telling us things that we don't know or haven't heard. And it's affected the product. I'm not smart enough to come up with a solution, but
I'll hush if you don't have any other questions, because quite frankly, I feel so strongly I could talk till midnight.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's a general, I'll get on the Tate soapbox for a minute, but if you look at society, it's a general shame that our teachers aren't paid more. In reality, they should probably be the most important people. And overall, across our country, it's just not that way.
Well,
And it hits a heartstring with me, it really does.
and I know that it's important to y'all, and I know that y'all wish that you could do more. Mr. Higdon, do you know what the per pupil expenditures are at Raven Gap?
pardon,
Do you know what the per pupil expenditures are at Raven
it's
Gap?
about 10,000 a year, I think.
That's what the tuition is. When I coached basketball, when I was the principal at Nantahala, I spoke to the coach down there and asked him one time what the tuition was. And he told me that it was $40,000 a year for a student who lived on campus. And
This
it
is
was,
kindergarten. Let me get you some exact, I'll get some numbers for you.
and he told me then it was $20,000 for a day student. And part of having a tuition like that is you exclude a lot of the kids that are challenges and take up the time of a kindergarten teacher that would prevent maybe the need for a teacher assistant. But those kids are going to grow up to be our citizens. They're going to grow up to be our taxpayers. They're going to grow up to be our teachers, our county manager one of these days, our superintendent, our sheriff. So, I think we have to keep that in mind. But I also want you to know as well that we are working, and I know that you believe this, that we're working to produce the most successful students that we can. And part of that is with the STEM coordinator that we were able to provide through the Golden Leaf Grant. And we've also had a strong partnership with the Business Advisory Council. And we've listened to them and what they say that they need in terms of employees here in Macon County. And I'm excited about the type of student that we are able to produce here in Macon County. As a matter of fact, we have one here tonight, Miss Cheyenne Hall. And I just want to give her an opportunity to talk to you. And I just want you all to know how proud I am of her.
Hi, my name is Cheyenne. I'm in 12th grade. I'm graduating this year. And I would like to talk about how I think STEM could be better implemented in schools. So, as of now, you don't really have engineering classes. You have science, yes, and math, yes, the standard, but you don't really see it implemented and like hands-on, and the technology portion of it, you don't see how it works in today. And I think that it is taking a step forward, and that people today in school systems are not prepared for it because you don't have the teachers to teach this. You added a class for coding, and I think that's a step toward the classes that you could add. I'm a part of the robotics team that was just implemented this last year. And before robotics, there wasn't a class that taught me anything about the STEM-related field. I just heard about it, but I didn't really know what it was. I'm like, okay, I'll just go into like criminal justice or something, which is still needed. But after being in robotics, I decided that I actually like engineering. So I'm gonna go get an engineering degree, and I'm gonna help invent maybe some of these technologies that can help better our school systems, like we've all been talking about, and just help further people in STEM-related areas.
Thank you, John. Sure.
Thank you.
That's all. Thank you.
Cheyenne has survived the Macon County school system, and she is a tremendous asset to the robotics team, and I'm extremely excited about her future. So one of the other issues that we're facing here in Macon County is that as our tier status improved in Macon County in terms of our economic outlook, the state determined that they no longer needed to fund early college to the level that they have in the past. So we're anticipating a reduction in funding from the state to early college in the amount of about $75,000. We'll have to find that money somehow. Currently, the recommended budget funds the teacher assistant and teacher's 2% supplement at an amount that we don't think will cover next year's 2% allotment. That's based on the additional teachers that we'll need to add as a result of the K-3 class size adjustment, and also projected salary increases, which we're, what did you budget, 3%? from the state. We did ask for consideration for our custodial and clerical staff in the supplement. These folks work for the school system, they work for the county, they serve our students, they serve this community. And they'll work for the school system, many of them will work for the school system for 30 years and never receive anything other than a cost of living adjustment for 30 years. So they're important to us, and I would just appreciate your consideration for including them in that supplement. And then finally, in reading over the recommended budget, it seemed to me like that the majority of the increases in the budget were due to unfunded mandates or mandatory benefit increases or things that were generally out of the control of the county. And I'd just like to point out that the school system is in the same boat as the county. We have to deal with costs rising. The consumer price index went up 2% over the past 12 months. We'll have to figure out how to deal with that. We'll have to deal with the unfunded mandates that I've discussed earlier. So we'll be dealing without some assistance in that, we'll be dealing with finding $170,000 in our budget to cover those costs. So that'll be a challenge for us.
Make sure I understand, Mr. Superintendent, the 170,000 is in a line item by itself?
No, sir. That $170,000 would cover the projected salary increases at 3%, the associated benefits increases that we're being told to expect a retirement increase this year, and hospitalization.
If we're adding up all these numbers, starting with the teacher assistants, and you add up
that is a separate line item, yes, sir.
It is.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
you're
each one of those,
$840,000.
roughly. I think the total was, increase over last year was $953,000 for everything. And now that included some teachers that it doesn't look like we'll need to put in place, because it looks like we'll be able to use the program enhancement positions that the state is providing to cover those teachers that we'll be adding in K-3. So we're not asking for K-3 teachers. We did ask for a guidance counselor, and that's because we're uncertain as to whether or not the school psychologist that we were able to receive through the state grant last year will be funded this year. So we've included that guidance counselor position. I think that was still in the request.
So let's go back to teacher assistants just a minute.
Okay?
So we did fund part of that.
Yes.
And
We
so-
paid for it out of local, yes. And that was from you.
But to make it, you're talking about K through 3 assistants? in every
No,
classroom?
no, and that's, I need to explain why there's a different amount there. That $144,000 was to cover the 4 additional teacher assistants that we feel like that we'll need, based on projected K-1, new K-1 classes for next year.
Do those come into effect in the next fiscal year, the class size requirements in FY20, or do they come into effect?
What
in
we'll be
FY?
faced with next year is maximum class sizes in K-3 cannot exceed 22.
That's in 1920.
Is anything about
That's in
the-
1920.
Is anything about that allotment formula, in other words, what you based your budget on in FY 18-19 from the state, the planning allotment, did anything about the teacher assistant requirements change in the 1920 planning allotment from the 18-19 planning?
Not that we're aware of.
So it's the same planning allotment for teacher assistants from the state in FY 19-20 as it is in FY 18-19?
Correct.
Okay.
Now, the problem with the way that the state looks at our planning allotment is they look at an LEA average. They don't look at the number of classrooms that we have at Highlands or the classroom that we'll have at Nantahala. They'll simply look at the number of kindergarten students that we have in our system, and they'll look at that number and say, all right, you need 12 kindergarten classrooms. But when you split those students up between Nantahala and Highlands, it has an impact on how those teachers are dispersed. And also, when you disperse those students within the 4 elementary schools here in the Franklin area, it's going to have an impact on how those students are dispersed. In other words, we may be dealing with an individual class size maximum at South Macon and not have the space to deal with a similar issue at East Franklin. So all those things do play into it. And so we're anticipating, looking at, and this anticipation is based on projected numbers for kindergarten next year. We were shocked when we started school in August of 2018 and found that we had 50 more kindergartners than we had first graders. That was a surprise to us. Now, this year may be completely different, but we really don't have any way of knowing until that first day of school. We've gone through kindergarten orientation. We're pretty solid on Highlands kindergarten numbers, but it's sort of a gamble at this point for the other classes.
Dr. Ball, are they concentrated? Was that 50 concentrated in one section, or is it spread pretty evenly?
Well, Highlands is increasing. Obviously, they didn't account for the entire 50, but Highlands is growing. They had 47 students in 9th grade this year. That's normally they have around 25 to 30. And in the Franklin area, it really wasn't concentrated. It was overall growth in kindergarten of about 50 students.
What is the difference when you look from planning allotment to planning allotment, like in FY 18-19, the planning allotment that is used, I get for the basis of.
Do you mean the funding
teacher
allotment or
funding,
the planning allotment?
Not your planning allotment for everything.
So the funding allotment.
The funding allotment, sorry. But the increase from 18-19 to 19-20 in that funding allotment for teacher for ADM was 11. From the planning allotment in 18-19 to the planning allotment in 19-20. And it looked like with that increase of 11 in ADM that y'all were going to get about six teachers, and that is with the like 4.5 and 2.5 of the.
We traditionally get 2 teachers for Nantahala Highlands. With the Geographically Isolated Schools Bill, we picked up approximately 7, and it depends on how many students we have at Nantahala Highlands and how much that would have impacted our overall ADM, because if we calculate based on our overall ADM, normally that would be fewer students. But in the case of Highlands this year, when the law says 1 teacher per grade level, and we need 2 teachers at several grade levels now, then that actually reduces the positive impact of that bill overall. So it's generally around 7 positions, and that's based on the amount. We then convert that to a dollar amount,
Yeah.
which comes out to around $350,000 to $400,000, roughly. So we received the traditional 2 positions that we've always received for Nantahala Highlands. Then we received that additional funding for the K-12s that we have had for the past, I think, 3 years. And then we also received an additional 2.5 positions for program enhancement. Now, the program enhancement positions are the positions that we're going to be using to cover the increased need for teachers in K-3. The whole purpose behind the K-3 legislation was a result of a legislator going into a classroom and realizing that there were more students in the classroom than the funding allotment provided for. So they felt like that the school systems were cheating them. They did not understand that at that time, 3 of those students in that classroom were providing the funding for the program enhancement positions, the music, the art, and the PE. So when the General Assembly decided to, take away the flexibility, then they needed to provide a way to fund those program enhancement positions. So they're bringing that funding back. Now, what we look at down the road in Macon County is that by 2021, we'll be fully into the K-3 class size legislation. At that point, our LEA average cannot exceed 18 at kindergarten, 16 at first grade, 17 at second grade, 17 in third grade. The individual class size maximum cannot exceed 3 above any of those. That's going to be a huge challenge for us to deal with. You know, and the only way that I can do that is to look at what we currently have now in K-3 and project how many teachers we're going to need by 2021. I can also look at what if that kindergarten increase holds. How will that impact us in 2021? Now, by 2021, we're going to need approximately 10 positions. That's looking 3 years down the road. That's assuming there's not going to be any flexibility from the state. That's also assuming that two things. I can look at it as if that kindergarten continues to hold up, and I can also assume that our numbers stay flat. So it's somewhere between 6 and 10 positions. Now, the program enhancements, we right now in Macon County, in K4, we provide about 14 program enhancement positions. That's music, art, and PE at our kindergarten through 4th grade levels. And the reason I say that's because our elementary schools are K4. Our 2 K-12 schools, of course, K-12. So there's some flexibility there, but we have approximately 14 positions. Looking at what the state's going to provide, based on the formulas that we're seeing, we expect they're going to provide funding for 8 of those. So I think, looking at that, we'll probably be all right, or close to all right, if we use those anticipated program enhancement positions to move those into K-3 positions. Now, of course, that will not give us any relief for the program enhancement positions that we currently fund.
So, in that same funding, so the teacher assistants, does that assume that the class size requirements are going into place in fiscal year 1920 rather than 2021? When you say that,
Well, I expect that they will. I'm concerned though that they will not understand when they fund Macon County at, for instance, kindergarten, and that whatever that. Are you looking at that funding allotment?
Yeah.
What do they project they're going to fund TAs at kindergarten? 2 TAs for every 3 classes of 21 students. Well, at Highlands we're going to have 2 classes of 11, 2 classes of 12. Now, you may think, well, you don't need a teacher assistant in that classroom. Well, if you've got 12 kindergarten kids and one of them throws up on themselves, you need another adult in there. So when they say that we have to reduce that class size, then we're going to have to adjust the supervision at least, not to mention the mental health needs that we'll have across the district. So I don't know how that's going to affect the way that the state funds teacher assistants. All I can tell you is that right now we're $150,000 short from the state in providing a teacher assistant in each one of our K-1 classrooms, and that does also include about 10 of those being part-time and not full-time. So how that's going to play in is a little bit of a, just like looking through that murky glass at this point for us.
Right. But so does it assume that the class size requirements, does this shortage assume that those are in place in the next budget year? For the TAs?
I would expect that the
number.
state funding will continue at pretty much the same level that it is.
So then that shouldn't be an issue till 2021
For the TAs?
for the TAs.
Well, we're already $150,000 short, and we're going to be adding four classrooms next year. And looking at Superintendent Johnson's projection for Macon County, and I don't know if he assumed Nantahala and Highlands and how the county's split up. He's only projecting that we're going to need 3 classrooms, and that's based solely on the LEA average, not the individual class size maximum.
But that should those teacher assistant levels adjust
Well,
according to the ADM?
Well, they won't adjust according to ADM, they'll adjust according to classes of 21.
Teacher assistant, that class size reduction's a phase in. It's changing every year, it's changing.
But there is not any change in next year.
Yes, there is a change
Yeah,
next year,
that's
yes.
But the allotments for you're planning on, for the teachers, the 1920 funding allotment, it has the same ratios as the 1819.
They
Class
dropped, the
size.
class size dropped one. We went from an individual class size maximum of 23, and also we went to an LEA average. The LEA average dropped by 1 in 1920.
It's crazy.
And then 2021 it drops again. And then the
So
final,
the class size requirements go into effect next budget year.
no, they phase in,
1920.
they've been phasing in for the last, they'll phase in over the next 3 years, yeah. We dealt with it to a certain extent this year. Matter of fact, we added one classroom at Cartuca J.
With teacher assistants, it looks like here in 17, 18, just while we're on the topic, we had budgeted in the beginning budget appropriation, and that's based off the figures that Angie had provided me. You said there was a 50,000, and there was right at a $50,000 increase from local money. 88,006 was what the beginning budget started with in 17, 18, and it looks like it finished here in the actuals with 121. When you move into 18, 19 and look at the fiscal year we're currently in, the beginning budget balance, that increased from that 88 number in 17, 18 to 162.6. So you added about 80,000 in local money to that line item in 18, 19. And it looks like as of May 2nd, there's 110,000 that's been spent out of that 162, leaving about $40,200 remaining. So when you prorate that out on a monthly basis, it's about $9,999 a month. So if you do for May and June, that'd be $20,000. So there would be about $20,000. It looks like if you use that prorating there in that teacher assistant category remaining in this fiscal year, but jumping into next fiscal year, the request is $418,417.
And part of
That's
that,
the
request was to move the 10 teacher assistants that we have that are part-time, to move them to full-time.
I was just wondering if there was any, maintaining the current service level, if there was any way that, if those, again, and it's prorated, but if that additional $20,000, it looks like, in the TA budget appropriation could be used to meet some of those anticipated shortfalls.
So you're saying that we didn't spend the...
Saying that as of May 2nd in the TA,
Angie,
That's because we're closing out the year and we're moving stuff and we're trying to use all the state money because that has to be zeroed out. So at this point in time in the year, and we've still got a lot to do at this point in time. So we will be moving some more to local probably between now and the end of June, obviously. And they still have,
and it looks like, in the same, but based on the same sheet of figures, the original request in 18-19 for TAs was 151,078. Whenever we increased the operating funds, that bumped that up to 162.
well, yeah, and that's possible. And when we budget for TAs, we're looking at what we anticipate that we'll need, and that's what we...
Trying to throw a dart at a moving target.
Right.
So it might not necessarily be a cut then. Does not fully
What's that
fund
now?
teacher assistants. It might not necessarily be that. If you
Well,
get into the year.
what we anticipate looking at next year with the addition of those classrooms.
You say next year, you're talking about
1920, yes.
Okay.
So Dr. Baldwin, and I understand we would all like to give a pie in the sky number, but we also have to balance, as you know,
Yes.
what
Yes,
our
sir.
taxpayers can afford. What would you say is a realistic number that you need for, not for capital, but for operations?
Well, based on what we understand about the state budget at this point, which is not a whole lot, we anticipate dealing with increased costs of about $140,000 for salaries and benefits, and then an additional $30,000 to be able to fully fund what we project the 2% supplement to be. So around $170,000 would keep us at our current level of service. Now, that would not provide the funding for early college. that would not provide the funding for the STEM coordinator, that would not provide any
Well,
additional
even
funding
if
for
you added
teacher
those, just throw
assistants.
those in. I mean, it's obvious STEM's important, et cetera.
Um,
I want a realistic number, what you want to see for y'all to do a good job.
Okay,
I don't want to, I mean, personally, I don't want to inhibit y'all.
What's your fund balance for you?
we were able to maintain our fund balance at what we calculate right now, about 1.35,
1.35.
and that's about where we ended last year.
That is where we, yeah, that's the.
And your STEM coordinator is 75,000,
Yes, sir.
and I'm with the business liaison council, and the STEM program is real important to those business people here,
I agree.
CEOs in Macon County. And taking up for Cheyenne's at, I'm telling you, TAs, mental health, all that's important. As being a part of this committee, the STEM program is a turning point for a lot of these young people. And what they're suggesting is to, number 3 there, talk about $105,000, I believe it cost for 2 teachers. They're asking for 2 teachers. One teacher for 5-6 school, and they want the STEM program put in the curriculum. Then you take another teacher and put that teacher 7-8 and put that in the curriculum, in the program. And their ideal is by generating energy with those young people down here in the lower levels, will create a more qualified worker, more
More successful student.
student, thing like that, especially at the high school. Cheyenne, if you'd have had this program, you went to the middle school and you went to the intermediate school, you went there. If we'd been able to have this program in your school, in 5-6 school, put it in the program where you'd have a part in this, would your mind changed earlier? Or, I know it changed when you got to high school.
Changed earlier because when we went and we showed robotics to the younger people, they were so interested, they didn't want to put the robotics down. They didn't want to put the controls down. So I think the earlier, the better.
And I think what I hear the CEOs talking about is this is an investment. It's not something, when you talk to John Knippel and those type of people, they're looking at a workforce. You won't see the end result of this. I'm not sure you'll see the end result. They're looking at a 10-year long-range plan. By incorporating this program into the 5-6, 7-8 in your high school, they will be the beneficiaries of a better qualified worker. And I'll say this for Miss Love, she's not with us tonight, her mother's sick. And, but people like Cheyenne, they just got a glimpse of this program. If we can incorporate that program in our 5-6, 7-8, and put it in there, I'm gonna call it the wheel or the curriculum, where a lot of students can touch this. Maybe in Angie's situation, some of those students that are coming through there with mental health problems, we can redirect some of that energy, I'm going to say, or lack of energy, into some kind of constructive academic work within the class. It's sad to sit here, and I've been in the same situation as Angie, when you hear that 75% of your students have problems, and you're trying to get that 75 to the same level of your 25%. So you've got to have a program like STEM or something there, try to gravitate that 75, get some of them in that 25%. And I think as Cheyenne just said, when you take these young kids today, if you have a computer problem at home, you take it to your kids at the house, they'll fix it for you. They're more energized when you bring something like this hands-on type thing into their classroom. It can be done, but that's gonna cost some money. I see here $180,000. which was 75 for the STEMS coordinator, and I believe I saw, what, 65, 65, or is that, or
75 for a STEM coordinator, and
we had it
then,
broken down.
yeah, the two positions, roughly $105,000.
yes, and the overall would be an additional $180,000. And the STEM coordinator is the key to the whole thing, and that's been misloved.
Yes.
But this is a game changer for young people, especially when you get them in that 5, 6, when they're, if it's raining outside and you said the sun's shining, they believe the sun's shining. They're so hungry for to learn that this is an opportunity here to really feed this part of it. And I hope, as we're talking through here, and I understand about TAs, mental health and those things, but you have to have something in here to insert, to energize other thinking. We've all seen this robotic piece that's come in here. The kids brought it in here, showed it to us. Been out at the STEM place, out at the
Industrial park.
industrial parks. And it's crazy. But you got it here at the high school level. Not saying it's bad, Cheyenne. I'm just saying you're too late. But we've got to put the energy down here and create a big influx of energy up the top. You'll have the Cheyennes, you'll have more Cheyennes up here in the high school level, and you'll just have a better student. And I hope we will continue looking at the STEM program, and I think I'm preaching to the choir here. Carl, he's definitely aware of the importance of these young people and working. Paul, you are too. This is something our school system needs. Not that they don't need TAs, things. I just think we have to try to find a way to incorporate, find the monies in order to have these things for our young people.
Well, and I want you to know, Warren mentioned that he was pursuing grants. Jennifer is, that's one of the things that she does, is she works diligently to find grant funding to help provide additional STEM opportunities. And like Warren, she's going tomorrow to a grant training for that Dogwood Trust. And we're also sending some folks, or we're pursuing the Dogwood Trust for mental health resources. The school-based health clinic is going to be a great thing, but it does serve a limited number of students. We're going to try to find additional ways to address mental health for our students.
I'll just say this, and I'll conclude. The STEM program has brought out some people that we would have never found before, or they would not have energized themselves like Cheyenne did. But they're out there.
There was a group of students we were missing.
Yeah, they're out there too. In that lower level, you can kick that in high gear there. You've got a better quality of student, got a better community. There's a lot of things, and I'm preaching.
So back to the chairman's question, Superintendent, if you add all these up, you're at $840,000. So a realistic number, I think is the way the chairman put it, for your operating expense.
You're asking me to tell you which one of those we don't need.
No, I'm just saying, you said you done admitted that does not fully fund teacher assistants. Well, we don't know at what level.
Right.
We don't know that until we get the state budget. We do know that the STEM coordinator is not going to be funded. We know that the Business Advisory Council is not going to be funded. You probably ain't gonna get no money for making early college. These things you know for sure. Now the custodial and clerical employees, I don't know why the state has never recognized that. We've talked about this before. I don't understand that at all. But another thing we've not mentioned is the new rules coming out in charter schools. There's a whole new set of rules, and it's really going to siphon it. It can start right here, and it's made it much easier now. It's just they've done away with any kind of oversight basically for charter schools, or that's what's proposed. And I was there to listen to it. So So at 840, are you saying that what you need for the schools to perform at the level you think they need to perform at, you need an additional 840,000?
That's what it would require to fund these requests, and these requests are important to us, yes.
And that's all of those are reoccurring expenses.
To the best of our knowledge, looking
We
ahead.
just don't, a lot of it's projection and guess.
Yes, sir.
But some of it's not. Some of it, you know, it's not going to be there.
The STEM and
I mean, there's some of these things that you know that you're not going to get funding for.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Over half of that money, no, a little bit more than half, you know that it's got to come from somewhere. I mean, if you want to maintain this, right?
Yes, sir.
Has the, like in non-instructional support, that's like for textbooks and classroom supplies?
Non-instructional support would be personnel,
Right.
and that would be your guidance, your
Custodians.
custodians.
Clerical.
007.
And is that also
003 is non-instructional support, so that's on your,
003, and that includes your textbooks, classroom supplies
no,
as well?
no. 003, non-instructional support is totally personnel.
I think we're looking at different. I was just gonna say, like in taking that for instance, you know, we budgeted at the beginning 1.8 million for 18-19, and you know, the request in 20 is going up about $146,000. And I
And for non-instructional support?
Mhm.
Yeah, and Angie, do you want to talk about the reason for that increase for those personnel?
So that does not include classroom supplies or textbooks.
No, that's totally personnel. And are you looking at the draft budget 003? Is that what you're, 1.8, I mean 1.9?
Yeah, 1.97.
So there's a 3% salary increase built in there for everybody, plus the benefits increase. And then there is a additional part of the early college, the $75,000 that we're planning on losing, we added to that because that will fund a clerical person. These are all your clerical people, all your data managers, all your school bookkeepers, custodians, if there's not enough in the state 003 to cover that, which there's not. And we keep those custodians on state because the state picks up the workers' comp, the state paid people, and those are typically your ones that are gonna have a workers' comp claim if anybody, so we try to keep those on state. But there's not enough to fund everybody out of that. What else is in there? This is all your clerical people. The custodial contracted service is in there, and that's because that takes place of 2 people, basically. And substitute pay is also in this line item, so that's based on current cost of substitute. All your receptionists, all your guidance clerical people, central office clerical people.
All right, I'm gonna move us along.
We're looking at 50 people at least.
I think we've got a good gist of it. Dr. Baldwin, I didn't hear anything about capital.
We have had a couple of emergencies in the last couple of weeks. One of our maintenance guys was on the roof at the cafeteria and media center at the high school and noticed that there was an issue with, is that from you?
No,
Should I thought you were handing it to me.
No.
With the trocal,
With the what? I'm sorry.
the trocal, the
Yeah,
membrane.
I got you.
It appeared to be contracted and stretching in certain places. We had a roofing contract. What roofing contractor look at, Tracy? Yeah. You want to explain what I'm trying to explain here?
You don't have a video Chad last night?
Has it got
No,
welded
no.
seams, Tracy?
Yes,
No welded?
yes, they are.
Okay.
The trocal's been on there probably 17 years. The life of one is 12 to 15 years. It's cooling at the internal roof drains. It's stretched, and around the the exhaust fans. It's going back from the edges for the brick, and as we see a lot of times, that will pull up your last layer of brick on the top and it'll actually pull that up on the roof because it's not got any elasticity to it anymore. So I called the roof contractor that we use, and he came and he told us that it could make it through the summer, but it would not make it through the winter because it would give a little bit in the sunshine, but as the cold weather hit, it would not give.
Is it leaking now?
We're starting to see some leaks. It's not major, but we're starting to see some.
The other issue is the chiller at Cartuca J. We put a refurbished chiller in there 4 years ago.
5 years ago, we put 2 compressors in. If you can remember that, it was a hot summer, and I know Andy remembers that as well. But it was, we put 2 refurbished compressors in there because they are obsolete. This technology was actually going out when that school was built 20 years ago. And so they don't make these anymore. So we have to buy some that has been remanufactured. And when we put these in 5 years ago, they were 20 to 25,000, and now they're 40,000 feet. The control system on it is shot, and they're telling us that the upgrade, the controls on that would be an extra $15,000.
Plus the refrigerator.
Plus R22 refrigerant is going to be obsolete in 2020, and it holds about 300 pounds of that.
$100 a pound.
$100 a pound. So, and then you're going to, we're just back, we're throwing good money at bad money when you put reconditioned stuff in this age of a chip. So I have a proposal of $125,000 for a new system. That'll be R410A refrigerant. State-of-the-art equipment.
And I was able to get the amendment to the capital outlay request for the roof, but we just finalized the estimate from Daikin.
Daikin applied, yes, and do you want a handout of that or you'll know?
We were hoping that we could find another solution, and we'll still be looking.
They are procurement, so they,
That's the only chiller you got problems with, Trey?
well, no.
You know how we feel about chillers, they cause lots of problems.
We have a contract with Daikin that services our chillers every year, and so that's really how we found this compressor gone. And so he came to service it, and he called and he said, Tracy, your other compressor that's there is just limping along. You've got one that's totally down. I was actually off yesterday, and one of my service guys went out, had to reset the one that is running. The compressor, it's got 2 compressors in it. The one that it's running, Ben had to reset 3 times yesterday. So it's not consistent. Today it had, and tomorrow it's liable to trip out 2 times. It's just old technology. It's just wore out. It's gone.
So you got 2 compressors, one goes out, 100% on that single compressor.
Yes, sir.
And if you got 2 compressors, they swap out,
Yes,
more longevity.
yes.
But what you're saying, you're on that one right now.
We're on the one right now.
That's the last leg.
That's failed.
Okay.
We had a vibration test taken on it, and compared to of course, you compare that to that style of compressor and their engineering specs on that, it costs anywhere from 7.5 up to be replaced immediately, and we're at 9.2.
We got to, I'm sorry, Tracy, I have to cut you off, but some of the board members have appointments here in just a few minutes with superintendent, so if you need to come back, we will.
Certainly appreciate your attention tonight. Thank you for considering this request.
Thank you.
Doctor, can I say one thing to answer your question, say, Dr. Mr. Tate? You asked about what if we were to prioritize. Can I give you those figures?
I want to know a number that what y'all need to be successful. Yeah, now we would all love to give every teacher another
I'm gonna put you on the
50,000
spot,
more.
and I'll give you a breakout about what they are, and then you can write it down and kind of go from there.
Can you send that in, Jim?
We can.
Because people gotta leave here in
Because
8
it comes
minutes.
about
so-
560, it could either be 500, about 526,000 or about 464,000. If you're trying to cut certain things and get them down to the basics of things we talked about.
500, so 550,000.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Good deal. Okay.
Perfect.
Thank y'all.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, Chris. Angie, thank you. Cheyenne, thank you.
All right, welcome Chief James. Y'all wanna look? It's in the book too.
Hello, everybody. I've got Bob Bothman with me also. He's our financial investment too. So carry on.
Let him get out of here.
All right.
It's not a funeral line. You don't have to shake hands with everyone.
All right, Tom.
Y'all have our budget request for what we're trying to do. We were wanting to, I'm sorry.
Let them ease on.
Okay, we've, this is the first time we've been up to ask for an increase, and we're trying to put on some, couple of pay people, secretarial and maintenance people at our station. We're growing so much, and we're needing to do some different things and get things going. Y'all have our proposal in front of you, I guess.
Tommy, we'll try and make this quick.
You got it.
I read your proposal, so I understand what the expenditures before. Do you have the support of your community
Yes, sir.
in general? Do you have support of your community association?
Yes, sir.
I believe y'all held an open house.
Yes, sir.
A public comment period where people can come and ask you.
Yes, sir.
Did you have any dissent? Anybody that said no? Oh my gosh.
What was it,
We did this by ballot, sir.
Okay.
Open
So
houses.
you mailed out ballots.
Open houses really don't work well in Scaly Mountain.
Well, for example, today Highlands held a public hearing tonight at 7. That's why they couldn't be here. Did y'all hold a public hearing similar? I called it an open house, but
No, sir, we did not. That's what I'm saying. We did it with our newsletter, which I think you all have a copy of it. We did it with a detailed ballot, which was mailed, first class mail to every property owner in
The
Scaly
flats.
Mountain and Sky Valley.
Okay.
The beauty of that is that covers 100% of our folks. We hold an open house, we get 2 or 3 people show up.
That's what we did it
This way, everybody got the same information at the same time. We got 108 ballot approvals, 3 disapprovals.
that's pretty
For the very
overwhelming.
thing that we're asking for.
Out of how many did you mail? So that was 111 out of,
Out of close to 800 for Scaly Mountain.
okay.
Tommy, I know that y'all have a pretty good sized payment on the building. And to the
Yes.
best of my recollection, Scaly's not been before this board that I know of, and since that building was constructed, is that correct?
Well, way before that, sir.
Yeah.
We made a presentation in 1999
Right.
when the fire tax was first approved. We have never asked for a non-neutral increase since then. So this is actually our first time back here asking for a true increase since the fire tax was first approved in 1999.
But you're doing okay with the payments on the building? I mean, that's a big leap.
When will it be paid off?
$9,333.18
When will it be paid off?
a month.
How much? 9,000 more?
$9,333.18 a month.
When do we project to be paid off?
We're in year 8 of a 15-year.
Okay.
That's wonderful.
So
It's a
that-
great building, by the way.
Those funds going to be potentially coming back to y'all at that point. Okay.
And we're good with that. But as Chief was saying, a good number of years ago, we recognized the need to hire some part-time maintenance. We're looking at a 20-hour-a-week position for maintenance. And we really need to start paying our secretary some time because
It's a lot of time.
it's a ridiculous amount of
It's
time.
more and more every year.
Yes.
Bureaucracy.
See, we answer to the federal government, we answer to ISO, we answer to the state of North Carolina, we answer to Macon County, we answer to the state of Georgia, we answer to Raven County, and we answer to the city of Sky Valley.
Sounds good.
Yeah. And about 6 other agencies that we belong to, and the paperwork is mind-boggling.
Any
So
questions?
We really need to compensate the person who does that, whether it's the current person or whoever follows. And on the maintenance side, our members, and this is a nationwide problem, volunteer fire department members are getting scarce as hen's teeth, and they don't want to do maintenance. They don't particularly want to do paperwork. They want to serve the community on the training and the emergency rooms.
Thanks,
Real
Paul.
quickly, Tommy, I'm a full-time fireman. The way I understand it, you know, you're one of 2, I think, that don't have a full-time fireman.
Right.
Can you do that in this budget?
We're hoping to, yes.
That'd be great. And you think the increase, by looking at the numbers and what you said in your letter here, that is going to happen with this increase?
Yes, sir. Now,
That's
that's
good.
part-time start with, and we see what happens,
See how
full-time
we
later.
go.
Yeah, gotta see how, you know how it is.
Any questions for Chief James? All right, thank you, Tom.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate
Thank you,
everybody.
Paul.
Thank y'all very much.
Highlands was holding their public session tonight. They had advertised for public comment for tonight, so that's why they are not here. So we'll be hearing them at our June meeting. I'm going to move item number 6 ahead, which is budget amendments. Can I get a motion to approve the
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
budget amendments? We got a motion by Commissioner Bill,
Second.
second by Commissioner Shields. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. If anybody would like to make some comments now, I would like to say that we as a board, it's impotent upon us that we're going to have to come up with some type of a consensus on this budget. If you have anything in the budget that you don't agree with, if y'all can let me know or Derek know or somebody so that we can discuss it, so that we can know. I'd like for whenever we get here, whenever we make it to that point, that I don't want to feel like as a chairman that I've cut anyone short. And I want to have everyone the opportunity to discuss publicly what's going on. So if anybody would like to have any other items that they would like to discuss, let's set a date for that so we can do it. If not, we will, I guess, reconvene at our June meeting. Will we have to approve, Derek, we have to approve our,
We'll have to have a public
Budget.
hearing. We'll have to have a public hearing.
well, do we normally do that, refresh my memory, do we normally do that at our June meeting? or
The
do we do
regular
that
June meeting
following?
is
Yeah, regular
legislative.
June meeting.
So we need to have another meeting if there's a question on the budget or whatever changes
If
we
there's a
might want to
question
have.
or-
So
Yeah, or we need to have any further discussions on anything. If we schedule that meeting before our June meeting, then in the absence of anything coming up at the public hearing, you could go ahead and adopt that budget then, that night, or you could wait a week
okay.
and adopt it then, or however y'all wanted to handle it.
Based upon that, let me just make a suggestion. I say if we can, let's hold another special meeting. Reason being, this Highlands Fire Department tax is significant. They're asking for it's right at 300% increase in their budget. And it's pretty simple explanation why property in Highlands is insane. And they're getting ready to have to put up a new building. So that we need to hear their comments because that's a big one. So I think if we're going to meet to hear them before the June meeting, then we might as well have our other questions and discussions ready to pan out. And I guess if we're in agreement with that, I'm seeing a few shaking heads here, then any other topics that we need to discuss, let's discuss at that same time.
I think Ms. Love would also be able to be here, hopefully, with, about the STEM program.
Okay.
And I'd like to keep that on the burner.
Does everybody have their calendars? Just
So is next Tuesday
a week
good?
from today? Well, it works with me.
Let's see, what date is next?
28.
Maybe early college graduation.
And and the health department meetings next Tuesday.
I'll skip that one.
We'll miss that one.
Next Tuesday, 6 o'clock.
Southwestern meeting that night.
Yeah,
Thursday the 30th?
High school, Franklin High School
That's
graduation.
graduation.
May 27th, Monday. No, that's Memorial Day, sorry. 29th,
Let's see, give me what date that's on.
That's on
Wednesday.
Wednesday. The Southwest Commission, RPO, Mr. Chairman. 5
Okay.
o'clock.
looking at the following week, June 4th,
I'm gone.
Tuesday, June 3rd, Monday.
Good. Well, I can drive all night. I can do that too.
Running out of
Wednesday, you
dates.
gone on the 5th.
No, I'm back on the
We
5th.
meet on June 11th for our regular meeting.
How about June 5th, Wednesday, June 5th?
Is that Monday,
Wednesday, June
Wednesday.
5th.
June the 5th?
Yeah, I got a Monday or Tuesday.
I'm wide open, so.
And Wednesday night's not good for church reasons.
Yeah.
Those of us that attend,
So June the
You what,
4th,
Paul?
those of us that go to church.
June the 4th,
June 3rd,
June,
Ronnie's out of town on the 4th.
Well, I'll be, yeah, I can.
June 3rd, just based upon Ronnie's schedule, can we go a little early? 5 p.m. work?
You're a 3.
What
I'm
day of the
fine
week's
with
that,
whatever.
Jim?
That's on Monday, the 3rd.
Yeah, let's do it.
3
What
3
time?
o'clock?
Huh?
3
3
o'clock.
We're gonna
Whatever.
blow the day anyway.
I don't have a life. It's up to Ronnie, working his busy schedule.
I gotta be in Raleigh on the 4th.
4
I'll
o'clock?
be in Burning.
I gotta let Miss Love know, so
Monday, June 3rd at 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
Monday,
o'clock.
June 3rd at 4 o'clock. If that works with everybody. And again, if y'all can email me or Derek or both of us, any topics that y'all would like to discuss further, or you're not happy with, or if there's a reason that you can't vote for the budget as is now, let us know so we can try and talk about it or figure out why or come to consensus on it.
I would ask that if you heard the school board's request, Derek, can you work on that and just see where you're at with that? Okay.
All right, can we get a motion to recess until Monday,
So approved, Mr.
June
Chairman.
3rd at 4 p.m. right here at 5 West Main Street in the Commissioners Boardroom.
So moved.
4 p.m., sorry, 4 p.m. Correction. 4 p.m. right here, Commissioners Boardroom, 5 West Main Street, Monday, June 3rd, for the purpose of continuing budget discussions. Can I get a motion to recess?
So moved.
Got a motion by Commissioner Bill.
Seconded by Commissioner Shields, he said under his breath.
All in favor?